I'm AJ Bianco, host of Reflect Ed, a part of the Education Podcast Network. Just like the show you're listening to now, shows on the network are individually owned and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another great episode of My EdTech Life. Thank you so much for joining us on this beautiful Monday evening. I really appreciate you again, as always, for joining us live. Also, for all the likes, the shares, the support, everything that you guys do. Thank you, as always, for making the show what it is today, because we do what we do for you so we can bring you some amazing episodes, amazing guests, amazing conversations week in and week out. So thank you so much. And a special shout out to our sponsor. Thank you so much, Goose Chase, for sponsoring My EdTech Life. And guys, if you are interested in making your classroom a little bit more interactive, enhancing learning experiences through a scavenger hunt type learning concept, please make sure that you visit Goose Chase, where you can get yourself 10% off your either district, your school, or even a personal plan just by using code MyEdTech10. So big shout out to Goose Chase for sponsoring our show. Well, guys, I am excited. We've got some great conversation today talking about STEM. We're going to be talking about bridging gaps, building futures, and we're going to be talking about girl powered. All right. So today I would love to welcome to our show. We've got Dan Mance, who's joining us, and we've got Omar and Patricia Cortez, who are joining us so we can learn more about what Girl Powered is doing, actually what it is, what it's doing, and so you guys can definitely get the 411 on really just building up some programs. And if you have any questions about that, I'm sure that today you will definitely get some answers. So let's go ahead and start off with some introductions here. So Dan, we'll go ahead and start off with you. Dan, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing great, Fonz. Thanks so much for having myself and talking about this great initiative, the Girl Powered Initiative. Excited to share some information about it. So thanks for having me on today.
Absolutely. Omar and Patricia, how are you all doing this evening?
We're doing great. Thank you for having us, Fonz.
Yes, really. Thank you. We're excited to be here.
Excellent. Well, I'm excited that you all are here because I'm definitely looking forward to getting some learning done from you all. So let's go ahead and dive right in. So Dan, we'll go ahead and start off with you before we get into the whole the girl powered and what we're talking about today. If you can just give us a little brief introduction and what your context is within, STEM and maybe the girl powered initiative.
Sure, absolutely. So as you said, my name is Dan Mance. I am the CEO of the Robotics Education and Competition Foundation. We are the largest robotics competition organization in the world. Last year, we had about 40,000 teams compete in over 80 countries. We do traditional mobile robotics, but we also do drones, workforce development programs. We're best known as the host of the VEX Robotics Competition. That's probably about 2/3 of our programs right now. Every year we have about 500,000 students that participate. And I've been with the REC Foundation going on 7 years now. My background is actually robotics. I worked in the auto industry and industrial robotics for over 20 years. I've been in Texas for about 10 years now. And it's been a fantastic opportunity. But both in the auto industry and high-tech companies, as well as in our competition programs, we just didn't see as many girls as we needed. And that's the kind of why we're here today. And I'll leave it at that as you introduce Omar and Patricia. So.
Absolutely. Well, I'm definitely excited about what you shared as far as your background, Dan. So that definitely lends itself to this conversation and obviously the initiative. And what we're talking about really too is getting more girls involved in STEM. And that's something that myself too have a little bit of experience with in my position and current role, and something that I am definitely a huge advocate for. So definitely excited about today. So now I'm going to turn it over to Omar and Patricia. If you can give us a little brief introduction, we'll go ahead and start off with Omar first. So Omar, give us a little brief introduction as far as what your context in education is, and obviously for the through the program that we're talking about, which is Girl Powered.
Absolutely. So I am Omar Cortez. I coach and teach robotics, and I also even do the drones, which is another thing that REC Foundation has just introduced this year. Within that, I've been coaching now Vex IQ for 4 years, and I've coached VRC for 3 years. And I've been within all these years coaching, over the last 2 years, we've had a Girl Powered initiative.
Excellent. All right, Patricia.
Hi, I'm Patricia Cortez. I am a teacher by day and coach by afternoon. I've been a robotics coach for Vex IQ for the past 5 years. The first 2 years were a part of a co-ed team. Then we began our Girl Powered initiative 3 years ago when 2 little girls came up to me and asked me, "Hey, can we venture off on our own?" And I was like, "Oh, I don't know. I'm not an expert in this, but you know what? You're taking the initiative to ask me, so let's do it. We'll all learn together."
I love that. And you know what? And that's the way it always starts. Or actually, that I would say that that's even a good start. Not, it doesn't matter that you don't know everything, but it's the learning that you guys get to do together. And I'm sure that we'll definitely hit on that because I know that that was a big part of my experience and just some of the best parts that I've learned from my students. That's really what I love to take in. But let's go back to Dan. Dan, I just want to talk to you a little bit just as we get into the program. But you definitely mentioned you had a really great, you mentioned, excuse me, a great background, you know, coming in where you had before. You were doing automotive, robotics, so that's your background. But I want to ask, how did that transition come to education, or at least in the education sector? So can you tell me a little bit about that?
Absolutely, Fonz. It's a question a lot of people ask. They're like, okay, you're working in the glamour of industrial robotics. I started as a controls engineer, got to travel the world working on robot systems, and eventually went into product development. And I led teams of engineers that designed, groundbreaking robotics. We were talking about AI, artificial intelligence for robotics 20 years ago. I mean, vision was a growing thing. And it was really a great career, and I enjoyed every second of it. But you're always trying to do something new. And over 10 years ago, I'd had an opportunity to run my own company. So, in Michigan, it was great, but I was traveling a lot, and I had a chance to move down to Texas and run a sheet metal company called Rack Solutions. And Rack Solutions was decidedly low tech. It was a product and manufacturing company for sheet metal products for data centers. But while I was down in Texas, 2 of my 4 children moved down to Texas with us. And, they didn't know a lot of people, but they knew that their older brother up in Michigan had a great time on the robotics team. So my daughters chose to join the robotics team here in Texas. And for one of them, unfortunately, it wasn't the best experience. And so when my youngest daughter was on a VEX team and she had a great experience, but when she moved to high school, I decided that, I had more time and I wanted to get involved. And honestly, one of my primary goals was to make sure that my daughter had the same opportunities and the great experience that my son had when he was in robotics up in Michigan. So, it was I didn't come down to Texas to necessarily get involved in robotics, but next thing I know, I'm coaching. And as the part of coaching, I'm giving feedback to my good friend was the president of Vex Robotics at the time, and offering input on how I thought the programs could be better. And he thought I had a good perspective and asked me to join the board. And then in 2017, I took over as the CEO of the Robotics Education and Competition Foundation. And for me, it's been full circle. I went from developing incredible robotics. Back then, back in the 90s, 2000s, you could see that robotics were going to become a bigger and bigger part of our life. And you knew that gap was going to be education. And so here I am. I end up at a large organization that we're motivated to make sure that our students have those skills for these robotics and STEM jobs in the future. So, and the girl powered piece, I'll get into that story in a little bit, but honestly, my passion for coaching robotics was to make sure that my daughters had those same opportunities that the boys did.
Absolutely. That sounds great. And, it's wonderful just to hear that transition, just to be able to hear you being able to be part of something that you're seeing and making a change and offering your services, and all of a sudden it's like, wow, look at this transition.
Yeah.
And now, based on the experience, that you mentioned that your daughter had, now you're out here promoting robotics, you're here promoting, of course, girl powered, and really bringing in better experiences, better learning experiences, and of course just really growing programs and making it more interesting, more appealing, more, just hyping it up, because that's what we need. I mean, we always talk about how there are very few girls following or pursuing STEM careers. So why is that? What can we do? And I just love the fact that you just took that step, and now you're working with amazing educators like Omar and Patricia. So let me just talk to them a little bit now. Omar and Patricia, how is it that you both got involved with the REC Foundation, and of course with competitive robotics, and of course promoting girl teams and promoting girls in STEM? So we'll start off with Patricia.
So 5 years ago, I had a colleague come up to me and say, "Hey, do you want to try this new initiative that Dallas ISD is promoting?" And it was Vex IQ Robotics. And so I was like, "Okay, I have no background in robotics, but let's do it." So throughout that, we were learning quite a bit, all the different aspects of robotics. It wasn't just building a robot, it was programming it, it was documenting the entire process, interview skills, all of it. So what I noticed throughout those 2 years were that my girls were kind of taking the back seat to things. They would focus on STEM research project, they would focus on the notebooks, they're always behind the scenes. So then 3 years ago, I had two girls come up to me and say, "Hey, we want to drive, we want to program, but we're a little bit intimidated by the boys." And I said, "Well, why be intimidated? Just go for it. Whoever does it best, like that's who's going to end up doing it." But they're still a little bit weary about it. So then we decided, they asked me, can we create our own team, just an all girls team where we can all try everything, we can all be a part of everything. And I was like, again, I'm not sure. I'm no expert at this, but you're coming up to me, you're having that initiative, so let's do it. So we did it. We started the Ladybots 3 years ago, and it's been such a fulfilling experience. It's been full of learning. These girls have shined. They've participated in so many speeches and in different events promoting girl power themselves.
That is wonderful. Omar, how about yourself? Tell me a little bit about your experience and kind of getting into this world of STEM and robotics.
So, getting into the world of robotics is a little bit interesting. It's funny. I started off like with I always knew I liked technology, and as a matter of fact, my first career choice was going to be to get certified like CompTIA Plus. But when I started taking all those classes, I just kind of lost interest of being in front of my computer all the time for more than just leisure. So I went into the education route. And when I was doing that, I was mostly focused on trying to teach tech apps as a class. In doing so, I actually moved over to Dallas, and I was introduced to robotics as an after school program, like, but it was nothing crazy. It was just like, hey, we kind of need someone. Do you mind doing it? And I was like, yeah, sure. And it wasn't Vex, but on our first date, we're getting the conversation going, and she swears that she was bored. She was bored on the date until I brought up the topic of blended learning for one, but two, I was like, hey, and then I also do this little robotics thing. So then she was like, oh, what? And she was like, yeah. So she started telling me about all the benefits of like getting into competitive robotics, and the rest is history. I mean, I had a whole career change. I went from tech apps, and then I switched districts so I can be a part of, because Dallas ISD does some amazing things for those teachers that want to do robotics. And so I switched jobs. I was teaching second grade math, and now I'm just diving in. I literally teach everything STEM. And as far as like the whole my experience with being with the girls, I mean, it my first year was an emotional roller coaster. Tears were shed, but from all parties involved. And girls just operate differently, and I had to become accustomed to that. But overall, it's just been so amazing and fun, and just watching the girls has been one of my proudest moments within this career.
That is amazing. And I love it because I can definitely hear from both, or I should say all three parties here, Dan, Patricia, and Omar. I definitely hear the passion in what you're doing. And obviously, just the experience that you're bringing and the work that you continue to do, which is something that is amazing and really pushing for more girls in STEM. And, it just really, I love hearing this because in my experience, very much like, Patricia and Omar, like you guys mentioned, like, hey, I didn't really know much, but all it was is like, hey, let's get started. I went to TCA in 2017 and then I brought back like a Makey Makey kit. Then it's like, okay, let's do that. Then through Donors Choose the following years, it was like, hey, let's get some Ozobots. Hey, I had no idea about First at the time. And then all of a sudden, I just started doing Code Club, doing all of that, which led to starting robotics and doing STEM camps. And one thing that I will note that I love because it kind of ties into this conversation is we started the Ignite STEM camp, and it was really just for my school because nobody in the district was really doing much, but I just because I just wanted to do it and my kids took off with it. So I said, hey, one summer, let's do a STEM camp. And of course, the majority was all boys. As the years went by, second year, we had, yeah, I think I had like 7 less girls than I had boys. And then my third year that I did it, which was, I think, pre-COVID, because during COVID we couldn't do it. But pre-COVID, we were at an even 50-50 split. So it was continuing to grow. And I absolutely know what you mean. And the fact that, empowering these young women and showing them that, robotics is not just for the boys, and the fact that many of them were doing and being very innovative with a lot of the challenges that we were doing through, either the drone flights, because we had the little telos and they would have to plan and they would have to code their flight patterns, and also with the first robots that we had. I mean, it was just amazing to see. And then now I received an email about 3 weeks ago from one of my former students that I had in 6th grade. And now she's at Georgia Tech and she is pursuing, a STEM, like, STEM background and going into robotics. And I think that is just amazing, And so the work that you're doing, I applaud you for the work that you're doing within the classroom setting, within, coaching your girls that you have, your teams. And Dan, I applaud you for the work that you're doing in advocating and facilitating, materials, facilitating the robots, facilitating training and all of that. So this is really exciting and amazing. So Dan, getting back to Girls Powered, I want to know, when did the Rec Foundation create, the Girl Powered program?
So Fonz, the program was actually created in 2016. It was a collaboration between the REC Foundation and Vex Robotics, and there was a good reason. So everybody that's probably watching this show knows that women are underrepresented in STEM careers. I remember, 5-6 years ago, it was mid-20s. I think the numbers inched up to 30%, but still a long way to go. So in 2016, Vex Robotics and the REC Foundation looked inward, and sure enough, the number of girls in our programs was in the 20s, roughly about 25%. And we knew that wasn't good enough. As a leading, provider of these STEM education programs and robotic competitions, we knew we needed to do better. So in 2016, Vex and the REC Foundation collaborated to redefine the face of STEM. And that's kind of our tagline for the Girl Powered Initiative, is to redefine the face of STEM. And that's what we did. It was launched early in 2016 with the goal of having some Girl Powered workshops in the month of October. Why October, you may ask? And that's because of the International Day of Girl is always in mid-October. And the idea was to do some workshops around that event. And it was pretty much a humble beginning. There weren't these big workshops like we do with Google and TI and BASF at the time. It was just sending these STEM boxes, bringing in women in engineering, women STEM influencers, and trying to increase the interest. But what happened later in 2016 is we started getting some grants to do girl-powered grants. And Vex Robotics was one of the big suppliers of these grants. So the REC Foundation is a separate organization. We're a not-for-profit, but Vex is a product company. And so they decided that they were going to give out girl-powered grants to start teams. And the requirement was that the team had to be at least 50% girl. So sometimes people say, why not all girls teams? And I'll be honest, the data kind of supports all girls teams maybe have a little bit more success as far as keeping young girls engaged. But at the time, it was to try to get more and more girls involved. And by providing these kits to teams that would be at least 50% girl, that kind of started that foundation. And so 2016 is where it all got started. In 2017, it really took off. Texas Instruments came to us and said they wanted to host a flagship event at their facility. That was fantastic. Google started showing interest, and from there it just blossomed. But it started in 2016. I'm sure you'll ask me later what the results have been, but it's continued to grow. And I would say that the Girl Powered Initiative is one of the defining programs of the REC Foundation now.
That is wonderful to hear, and especially just all the work that you've done and where it continues to grow. Now, I did want to talk a little bit about the following. I know you mentioned, and we'll probably get into that, but how important has the partnership with Google been? I mean, being the biggest company, that is out there. I mean, everybody knows Google. I myself, being Google innovator and so on, they partner up with so many great education causes. So how positive has it been to be able to partner up with Google?
It's been incredible. So, I mean, I do want to give a shout out to Texas Instruments. And to this day, they still host our flagship event in Dallas because they were the first big company that got on board. But Google in California saw the need as well of getting more girls in robotics, and they thought that the VEX Robotics competition was the way to do it. So they reached out and said they wanted to host a girl-powered workshop. So we hosted that first girl-powered workshop in 2018. I actually went to the event, and there were 400 girls there, and the room was electric. But what was important is it wasn't just explaining the importance of STEM. We actually brought kits for all these girls to build and program a robot. So it was a 2-day workshop, 8 hours each day. And then we ended the workshop with the girls having a competition. So what that did is it wasn't just introducing it, it was making them understand that we can actually do this. We can build these robots, we can program these robots and compete. And so that first initiative in 2018, roughly half those girls joined a robotics team. So the next year, Google's like, we're going to do another one and we're going to make it bigger. So the following year, 2019, it was 2 weekends of girl-powered events. And then they started saying, we want these girl-powered events to be global. So I went to a girl-powered event in Singapore at a Google facility, and we started doing them at their facility in Washington. And meanwhile, our October events, we were up to 200 event partners were hosting girl-powered events. It was really, really growing. So with the pandemic, Google did not stop funding the initiative. They continued to fund the initiative. And it got to the point that after the pandemic, we sat down and we said, you're doing so much. You're providing so much funding. You're hosting these workshops, not just in California, but across the country, across the world. And we met with them and we said, well, you know what? Google should be the presenting sponsor. So I think what it is, it's not just the funding, and Google's invested millions of dollars into this initiative to give out kits, to give out stipends to the coaches, to give out training. It's not just about the kit. They provide funding for all that, but they also their influence, the branding of Google, knowing that they support the REC Foundation, and this program has been just as important. And again, BASF, another large company, they understood this initiative. They sponsor girl-powered events at their facilities. They do a flagship event for BASF in Louisiana. And there's other Fortune 500 companies and even small companies across the globe that are doing these girl-powered events. But I think TI and then Google, both their funding and the reputation those organizations have really elevated the Girl Powered Initiative to another level.
Wow, that is great. I love that. And just to hear again, Dan, the way you said just that this has grown. So now going from that, now that I see things from your side, Dan, and the way that you've explained the growth, now I want to go to obviously our teachers here, to Patricia and Omar, based on what Dan said and that just continued growth. I want to know, how has that impacted your programs in a positive way? So we'll start with Patricia first this time.
So my girls actually participated in the REC Foundation's Girl Powered Challenge last year. And so adding on to what Dan said, I'd like to point out some of the statistics that they found that were eye-opening for them. They're kind of in a little bubble where they didn't realize how big this really is and how big of an issue it is. but they found that only 6% of scientists and engineers in the American workforce are Hispanic. They found out that only 27% are women and only 2% of them are Hispanic women. So my girls are all Latina. So they were like, whoa, we are a double minority. I had to explain to them what is a double minority. And they were like, wow, like we are really not represented in this. So that really kind of ignited a fire in them to set out to share the girl powered message. They participated in a conference alongside a team from Colombia and Mexico, and where they were talking about how the Girl Powered Initiative is really important. And I want to quote them on one of their sentences that really just gave me chills from their Girl Powered challenge. And they said that girl powered means inclusion for all, no matter the race, the gender, or the ethnicity. So this just showed me that they're no longer just advocating for women. They're not just advocating for Hispanics, but they're advocating for all, not for everyone, to be involved in robotics after seeing all these statistics. So that's just given me more motivation to try to recruit more girls, to try to continue to spread this knowledge with girls, with people, with all sorts of people. What doesn't matter gender or ethnicity, like my girls said in their essay.
That is wonderful. Omar, how about yourself? What have been some of the positive things that you've seen as you've continued, through the girl powered events and robotics? And obviously, maybe at the beginning of the year, even with recruiting, as this is a new year, you've got a fresh start, additions to your team. How has the success that has been going on in the background, with TI, with the Google partnerships, with Vex, with the REC Foundation, how has that impacted, or you've seen the impact in your programs in a positive way?
I think the biggest thing that, like, if I'm honest, is it's the girls finding the voice for themselves, right? So robotics gives them a voice, and there's just so many. They come in, and more often they're usually really shy and pretty quiet until they get comfortable. But then they only become comfortable with one person, and they only talk in front of you, and so on and so forth. Through robotics, girls have had to participate in multiple conversation points. So you have the alliances where they have to talk strategy, right? So now it's alliance to alliance. You have alliance to coaches where they want to, ask probing questions so that they can figure out where they're going to go with their program or where they're going to go with their building, and they start building that, developing that comfort. Then you have the students talking to judges, both for the interview, which can come from the design process where they have to explain, what they've done and how they've gotten to this last point. But most importantly, they're able to advocate for themselves when a call maybe doesn't go their way, and they look at me and I'm just like, I can't say anything, that's you. And they have to be able to speak up for themselves. So watching these girls come in usually at a very shy standing point, and then watching them grow to being able to stand up for themselves, advocate, and say that they're, and have that belief that they're just as good, and and they are even better most of the time, has really been the most impactful to me and the program at our campus. And these girls, they're super confident about it. Another quick one is just like their capabilities. Something each year we try to challenge the kids with something new and getting better. Obviously, we're getting better as coaches each year, and we learn something new. So over the last 2 years, I had to learn CAD myself and then teach the kids how to CAD. Well, now I have these girls CADing and watching them just sit there and helping these kids turn their designs from a sketch to a 3D model has been amazing. Like, it's mind blowing to me because I never had seen that myself. And these girls, so I have them, they come in, they'll put on their little headphones and they just get in the zone and they start 3D modeling these intricate robots and, telling me how it's going to work, and then they start building them. And it's just amazing to see what these kids can do.
That is wonderful. And that's so good to hear it. And just to hear the excitement in both your voices, Patricia and Omar, that really gets me excited. And we're definitely getting some love here from the chat. We've got Erica Sandstrom, who's joining us from LinkedIn, also saying, love this. Thank you for all the work that you do. Also saying that, this is so beautiful as you were telling the story and sharing. Also, we've got Sherry Fleischer. Also, Sherry, thank you for joining us, saying thank you for your work. It is very challenging to keep girls involved with her robotics team. So thank you so much for sharing. And also I want to give a shout out to Tanya, who is joining us at the very beginning too, as well. Elementary teacher, second grade, great educators that are here today. And obviously, your energy is very contagious. So going back to Dan, I want to ask you now, through your experience, what has been some of the social impact that, the program has had, or that you have seen for yourself?
Well, I have to say, I can't say it better than Omar and Patricia did. I think we can look at it from a statistics point, where in 2016, only 24% of the students in our program were girls. And pre-pandemic, we were inching into that 42, 43%. Just like the STEM world in general, we took a step back during the pandemic. It dropped into the 30s, but we're almost back to that same pre-pandemic level. But there is really good news, really encouraging news, and that's in our elementary programs. It is at 50 or over 50%, right? And the data shows that if we can engage these young girls in elementary school, and as Omar and Patricia said, they realize that they can build the robots and they can drive and they can program, and isn't just doing the design notebook. They're more likely to stay with it. That's the big challenge now, is we're engaging these girls in elementary school, even in middle. Let's keep them involved in 8th and 9th grade as they transition to high school. So from the numbers point, again, nothing wrong with going from 24 to 43%. We wanted to be at 50%. We didn't make it, but I don't think that means we're a failure. Again, at the elementary levels, we did hit that 50%. But that's the statistics. I think the impact is, for example, in 2021, where one of our world champion VEX robotics team was an all-girls team, right? That had never happened before. And then now more and more, as teams advance through their regional, their state championships, and they get to the VEX Robotics World Championship, you're seeing more and more girls. Now, I'll be honest with you, Fonz, the number of girls at VEX Worlds is still lower as a percentage than the number we see overall. And that's because some of the most highly competitive teams still tend to be a lot of males. But, Patricia's team was at VEX Worlds last year, and they lit the place up. They were incredible. And that number of girl students that are competing at the state championships and the world championships levels is also increasing. And what that means to me is, statistics aside, the girls are more comfortable driving the robot. Girls tend to be better communicators at these ages as well. So their teamwork is outstanding, and we're finally seeing it translate. So, it's going to be a decade before these girls, graduate high school and go to university and become the scientists and become the engineers. And as Patricia and Omar said, it's a double whammy for our Hispanic students, right? So our Hispanic and Native American students, they're really in the minorities here. So we're very thankful that so many of our workshops, we'll have over 200 workshops in October, will focus on these underserved communities. And another area I'd like to highlight too, and this is where Google has really, with the funding they've given us, is reaching out to rural America too. That's another area where girls tend to do more of the traditional roles. And because of the power of the Girl Powered Initiative and VEX Robotics and our drones programs, they're trying it. So again, I gave you the statistics, but the real story is the fact that we've had now 2 teams, world championship teams that were all girls, and that we're seeing more and more at the highest levels, girls competing. So we're just started that journey. We have a long way to go, but we're getting there.
Excellent. All right. Now, before I go back to Patricia and Omar, Dan, I want to ask you a little bit about this. And again, this is just maybe a little bit different or a question, but from your perspective, what would you say some of the barriers to entry are, that at least that you see, because you deal more with, I guess it's either like the vendors, the school districts, and so on. What are some of the barriers that you see in order to maybe start implementing these programs? Maybe if you can name maybe the most common, or maybe if there's a couple that, and again, this will help our districts just kind of see like, hey, what can we do to maybe get these programs on here and maybe just not have those barriers. So what do you see on your side?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, Fonz, and actually a difficult question. So I think the one that the Cortezes touched on is the biases, right? That when girls join a team, the boys do the building and the driving, and the girls do the notebooks and the presentations. Because frankly, the girls have really good communication skills. A lot of time they have nicer handwriting. So there's preconceived biases that kind of push the girls into one role and the boys to the other. And as coaches, as the REC Foundation, we have to work really, really hard to make sure that every student gets a chance to drive, program, and build the robot, right? So another thing is coaches, is we don't have enough women coaches. We don't have enough Hispanic coaches. So if Hispanic girls join a team and they're coached by a white male, that's probably an outstanding coach. There's no doubt about it. But when they're coached by a Hispanic woman, there's a connection there, and I think that helps a lot too. So what can we do from a school district side? Well, we're a big advocate of getting stipends to our coaches. It's amazing that so many places will reward basketball coaches, volleyball coaches, and football coaches, which I'm not against. I think those are great things, but let's incentivize our robotics coaches to do the same thing. So let's get some stipends out there. And then the REC Foundation, we don't want Girl Power just to be the REC Foundation. We want FIRST, we want MATE, we want all these organizations to embrace this, because we provide tools that will excite girls about joining. And I think the other thing we have to recognize, Fonz, is if a girl joins a robotics team and they don't like it, that's absolutely okay, right? At least they're trying. And at least as they progress through their academic career and their careers, they'll know what robotics were, and they won't have a bias that was just a boys thing, right? So we have to be open that boys or girls that join our program may not always like it, but let's get the girls the opportunity. And if they choose to go something else, that's okay. But that alone will help change the biases in the future.
Absolutely. That's such a great answer, because one of the things that I did want to add, and I did do a little bit of research on this for one of my doctoral studies, really, it was just that representation. I know oftentimes I wonder how things might have been different for myself if I would have seen, like, hey, there's a Hispanic scientist, or, here's a Hispanic engineer, and so on. And it wasn't until later on that I grew up that now that's what I want to do for my students and that are within my district. And that's one of the things that now, even with technology, being a science teacher, I can, find a scientist and be like, hey, let me show you. And they're like, oh my gosh, like they look like me, that, they come from a similar background like me. And I think that is so important. So going back to Omar and Patricia, and I'll start with Patricia first. I'm sorry. Patricia, I want to ask you, as you started your program, and I know you had, the young ladies were already involved and had that initiative, but what do you still see might be some of the barriers to getting more young ladies to be part of a STEM program such as the one that you have?
So definitely, first and foremost, exactly what Dan was saying, the bias that girls aren't builders, girls don't do that kind of stuff. The lack of representation, they don't see themselves in people. Lots of young ladies flourish on when they see somebody or a leader or a role model in that role. And if we don't have the coaches, the female Hispanic coaches, or the even just female coaches to represent for them, they're not going to want to do it either. When I first started off my team, it was two girls that wanted to do it. So we still had to search for a whole nother team, like more teammates to actually join the team. Most of the girls wanted to do cheerleading, or they wanted to do some sort of sports, robotics. It was tough when we started out. We couldn't find the girls that actually were actively interested in it. I kind of had to push it on some girls. And then once I began to kind of shove them into it, that's when they realized, oh, hey, this is fun. It's not just building a robot and not just programming a robot. There's a lot to it. And like, you can flourish in different ways. You don't have to be an expert at building in order to be a part of the robotics team. You don't have to be an expert coder to be part of the robotics teams. There's lots of roles, and the girls get to try these different roles. They get to share the role. They get to divide and to better manage their time. They learn a lot of skills that they didn't know were in robotics. So after I had like my little guinea pig group, that's when other girls started expressing interest in it, when they started seeing the girls going out and what they were really doing. And I think just having that face, someone to actually do it, that's when the girls will actually come and be involved and ask for it and ask for more.
Perfect. Omar, how about yourself? What have been maybe some of your barriers that you've had to overcome as you're working with the teams?
Well, Fonz, I think fortunately, we did have the barriers at first with the same stigma. But after the first year, when they start seeing the girls bringing home trophies and all that good stuff, they're all want to join. And right now, the girls team at our campus is actually the most wished to be in. They have the most numbers in kids, and that is just what we're very fortunate at this moment that we have those girls. But it's definitely that. I mean, I found another female coach before my wife joined me in middle school, and she has now moved on to STEM, but those girls in a STEM field, in cybersecurity actually. And so it's really cool for, even my girls that remember her and got to see her grow into that position. And now she's in STEM. And so definitely when you're like you said, Hispanic or a female, and you start bringing the trust, and Hispanic parents start trusting you a little bit more and all that stuff, and it becomes a lot easier going into that. Even like one thing that I do every morning with my students, just for a little bit of social emotional learning, is I go off the curriculum a bit, and I start reading a book with them called Spare Parts. And if you haven't read it or seen the movie, it's the one with the 4 undocumented immigrants that did a robotics team. And boy, do we talk a lot about identity issues. And what that ends up doing is it brings a buy-in, and this, once the students buy in, it's game over. Like it's just a self-moving train, and the momentum starts building up because the kids see themselves within the characters of that story and all that stuff. So really, I think once you have the buy-in, it's really smooth sailing from there.
Excellent. Well, that's good to hear. I love that. And I have one question from Sherry that just came in. And Sherry was asking, so Omar and Patricia, if you can chime in. It says here, is the program that you all hold, is it during the day or is it after school?
Well, I'll answer. It started off as after school, and it was just I'd see my kids an hour on Tuesdays and an hour on Thursdays. Fortunately, with the growth of the program, I started off with 6 kids. I think last year we hit 40, and this year we're at about 32. Um, Fortunately, with the growth of the program, I told them I don't have enough time after school to be seeing the teams and all that stuff, and they built it into my schedule in order to support me in an effort to serve all the kids. So aside from the offerings of in class, I offer intro. So for classes, I offer intro to robotics, advanced 2, and then when the kids are in advanced 3, it's a competition class. But it wasn't always like that. It was after school. As for her, when she was in elementary, also after school. But now we're very fortunate that we get to see the kids during class.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. So, Sherry, hopefully you take some notes, and like I said, maybe we can build that into your program too as well. And obviously, you can always reach out to Omar and Patricia. I have been sharing their socials, and of course, that'll all be there in the show notes. So, Dan, I just coming back to you, Dan. As far as we're kind of winding down here, I just kind of want to know a little bit more. I know we've shared a lot of stories and so on, but I want to know: are there any specific stories that really do stand out through the work that you're doing? I know that talking pre-chat, you and Omar and Patricia know each other very well. You work for their school district, but if you can share with us just some of those highlights that you have seen, at least maybe even post-pandemic, because we know coming back, maybe it might have been a little bit rough, but what are some of the highlights that you've seen as far as growth of the program, and obviously with the young ladies that are being involved, and so want to hear a little bit of those testimonials if you don't mind.
Yeah, so I'll give 3. The first one I touched about, and again, every summer we have a girl-powered workshop in California. Google hosts it. 800 girls come through, and one of the girls that attended a girl-powered workshop in 2019 became a world champion, right? And she's got her start at a girl-powered workshop. So that's obviously a great story. But I'm very fortunate because I get to travel and I get to meet students all over. And I think every year now I probably get at least 24 letters from young women that tell me that they've applied to a university for engineering or science, and they got their start in the Girl Powered program. I think, and if I'm getting, 20, 30 letters, how many more are out there? And so, and there's a couple specific stories of a girl I knew that grew up in a traditional household, and that her focus was going to be stay-at-home mom and raise her children, and she still wants to have a family, but she fell in love with robotics, and now she's majoring in engineering. There's stories like that. We have in El Paso, Texas, which is primarily Hispanic. They run the largest girl power workshops every October, and they always have over 500 girls attend the workshop. So that gives me some really good hope too. And so those stories really resonate for me. But another interesting one is with our new drones program. So we launched a drones program a couple years ago because we realized not everybody wants to go into mobile robotics, whether it's aptitude, interest, or the amount of time. But our drones program has a lower entry point. You pull a drone out of the box and you fly it, and it still has STEM skills, but you're not building and stuff like that. But I was at an event in Dallas, actually, not that long ago, and there was this young girl that was sitting there on her laptop programming her drone. And she was really, really engrossed in the programming because she wanted her drone to do better on the autonomous programming flight. And so I started talking to her parents, and they said that literally 2 months before, she had no interest in STEM. And she saw someone flying a drone. She thought that would be fun, kind of had that e-sport vibe to it. And she wasn't as satisfied with the performance of the drone. And they're like, well, you need to get there and you need to program it. And now she's an absolute whiz at programming. She's going to major in computer science in college. And it's really transformed her. Again, giving these young women, these ladies, an opportunity to try this stuff is really going to make a difference for them, but also for all of us, right? Because we need women in our workforce. We need women in these STEM jobs. We're kind of shortchanging ourselves by not having these very talented women into our programs. So I'm very glad that the REC Foundation and VEX Robotics started that. Again, we wanted to make our programs reflective of the world we live in. And I think you're seeing that when you go to a competition in Dallas. You see girls and boys, you see Hispanic students, you see white students, you see, African-American students. We have Native American initiatives. So while Girl Powered focused on getting more women involved in STEM, the overall mission was to make it reflective of everything. And we're starting to see that. And honestly, Fonz, it's people like you that hear the story and willing to use your valuable airtime to tell the story. It's, Omar, Patricia, and the tens of thousands of other coaches we have that give up their evenings and their weekends for this. That's what's making this happen. And I think the future's bright, to be honest.
Absolutely. No, I agree with you 100% on all of that. And, it really does move. We may not see it, but overall, all it takes is just one person. And I had a good friend, Al Thomas, he was on the show once, and he said, you never know who's watching you, or doing that one little thing that can change the trajectory of just one person altogether. So all it took was for this one young lady to see somebody flying a drone and take some interest, and now, just be so immersed in it and seeing the possibilities, and of course the doors that opens up, the bigger interests and so on, and moving forward. And that's all it takes. And it's just for myself, I would always tell my kids, it's like, guys, we can break this cycle. Let's get into this. Let's get into STEM. Let's do what we can. And this can open up doors for you, set you on a different path, and just to a brighter future, and doing those things. So last questions, guys. I want to ask Omar and Patricia. I want to ask you guys. Robotics being such a competitive sport, and obviously there's definitely a lot of collaboration and communication and soft skills. How have you noticed your students grow from maybe like just barely entering the program to, as they go through the years that you have them, how has their soft skills developed? And I love to hear that, because I think a lot of times we don't work on that too much in our classrooms. Obviously, curriculums are really fast and you got to move on. So this is a great opportunity to really work on those soft skills. So Ahmad, what do you notice about robotics and being able to develop soft skills through the program?
Definitely, as previously mentioned, the biggest one was the finding the voice, and watching my kids find a voice. But as far as like other skills, the confidence, they walk differently as they come in through that classroom. When they wear our team hoodies at school on Fridays or for Spirit Day, it's they feel a part of something, and they it's their brand and that they've created, because everyone knows, the robotics kids, and because they can see them in you've probably seen us at, if you have been to a Worlds event, we're usually the kids in the bright yellow hoodies. And the kids wear it as a badge of honor, as a badge of confidence. And so to see all of that and watch the kids come out of their shells has been amazing.
Awesome. Patricia, how about yourself?
Definitely those communication skills. They advocate for themselves, not just on the field, but in the classroom. If they see something wrong, they say something. If they see something happening with their peers, they're not shy to speak up for themselves, especially if they see something is going on that shouldn't be happening. Um, the confidence of speaking with an adult. A lot of Hispanic children don't really talk with adults or don't hold adult conversations with them per se. So the fact that they can go talk to these judges or that they can present on an interview, my girls have had the honor to present for our local Fox 4 News, for ABC. And so the fact that they can get on TV and talk to an adult, to talk to a reporter without shyness, like that's amazing. I still get nervous when I'm talking in front of the camera. Doesn't matter if it's a Zoom call, but these girls can go on live TV and talk about the robotics program and the passion that they share. They truly are out to share the mission of Girl Powered, and that's just amazing to me.
I love that. Well, guys, I mean, this has been amazing. I want to thank you all, Dan, Patricia, and Omar. Thank you so much for stopping by and sharing your stories, taking a little bit of your evening, especially today. I'm not sure if it was a holiday for some of you guys. You might have had a day off or not, but I thank you guys for sharing. Really, there was so much information, but we're not ready to close yet, So what we'll do is definitely want to make sure that we let our audience members know how they can get involved with Girl Powered. And I know I've been sharing the website throughout the chat, and that'll be in the show notes. But Dan, I want to come back to you and ask you, what can school districts do? Maybe somebody's listening to the show and says, hey, I want to get involved, whether it's, starting a team, where can I get some information? Or what if I would like to partner, and continue this mission? So Dan, what can our audience members do to get in contact with you?
Well, if they want to know about the Girl Powered initiative, they can just go to girlpowered.com. That's pretty easy. But it's as we all talked about, this is just part of a larger initiative of robotics and drones and workforce development, right? So if you go to recf.org, again, recf.org, and you hit the about, you can always send us an email, support@recf.org or support@roboticseducation.org. But you also have a map you can click on. It shows a map of the world, and you click on a country, or in this case, the educators on this podcast will click on the state, and it'll give you your contacts for your VEX robotics program as well as your drones program, right? So always encourage everybody to check out both sites, again, recf.org or girlpowered.com, and I think you'll learn a lot. And the girlpowered.com, I mean, we've already closed down the workshops. We'll do a couple hundred workshops in October, but everything has been sent to our event partners. And but if you want to go onto the Girl Powered website, you can get a lot of templates on how to do fun STEM activities and get coaches guides. There's a lot of good material there. And most importantly, if you click on some of the videos, like the Girl Powered Pledge, that video was done back in 2019. I'm in that video, as is my daughter. It's one of my all-time favorites. But that video actually, if you do take the pledge, kind of talks about what this is all about. And we don't really promote the pledges as much as we used to, but it's both for the girls and the boys to take this pledge that we're going to work hard together to really change the ecosystem that we live in. Right, like I said, I started the whole thing with redefining the face of STEM. So by taking the pledge, you're committing to help redefine the face of STEM. So again, one more, girlpower.com or recf.org. And I like to think our website's strong enough that people can figure it out from there.
Absolutely. And that'll definitely be on the show notes as well. So for all our audience members that did catch that, or you're going to be listening to this, just click on the show notes. You're going to find all the information if you want to get more involved or bring a program to your school. Well, guys, thank you so much. I really appreciate you all, but we're not done yet. Have you noticed on the invite, there are the last 3 questions that I love to end the show with at every single time. And I know that they may be, at least the first question might be a little bit tough. And, but, I always like to just make that connection as far as to hear from my audience, or excuse me, to hear from our guests. What are some of those pain points that they may be seeing in education that we can do better, or some barriers that may be there to, better? And I always refer to that as the edu kryptonite, because as we know, kryptonite was Superman's greatest weakness and it would just debilitate him. And then so sometimes just hearing either a word or seeing some practice, like for me, one of my biggest kryptonites is state testing for education. So that's what I'm going to say there. But I'll go ahead and start. I'll make my way from Omar, and then we'll end with Dan. So Omar, in the current state of education, what would you say would be your edu kryptonite?
So I really thought all day about this question, and I'm very fortunate. I'm in a very fortunate position that my district supports everything we do. My school supports everything I do, and I've won grants from Texas Instruments and all that stuff. If I had a kryptonite, honestly, I just need more space for my fields and for the kids to fly their drones around. But I'm in a very fortunate situation with all of that.
Perfect.
Thank goodness.
Hey, that'll work. That could be a weakness right there. Definitely having more space for drone flying. Hey, that's great. How about
that
you,
an organization of all the pieces everywhere?
There you go. How about you, Patricia? What would you say would be your current edu kryptonite?
So as a core content teacher for this is my 11th year teaching, did math and science for 10 years, my first year, embracing social studies. It has to be, like you said, the standardized testing. The emphasis on test prep for standardized testing, it inhibits us. We're not able to do hands-on inquiry-based learning. We're not able to do as much STEM incorporated, STEM cross-curricular activities, because we have to get them ready for this state assessment. We have to get them ready for the district assessment. So definitely, like you, Fonz, that the standardized testing, it just kills me every year.
Yeah. And you hit on something that I absolutely love, that I wish we could see our curriculum more as cross-curricular and not
Right.
necessarily siloed, because I believe that would leave more opportunity too to be able to do more hands-on. But again, just depending on school districts and so on, and obviously curriculum, it's like we got to go, 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 go. And at least I know from my experience in my district, it's like from January to May, it's like everything shuts down because it's like STAR testing season, like STAR prep, and it doesn't leave a lot of room for any additional, activities, and programs and so on to get the students involved in. So yeah, I'm with you on that. Dan, how about you? Maybe for you, maybe we can switch it around and maybe just focusing more on the robotic side of it, or if you want to answer, overall in education, what would you say would be your current edu kryptonite?
It's interesting. So in my position, I meet with a lot of corporations, and we always can use more funding, and we actually could use a lot more funding. But I also tell people that don't want to give us funding for robot kits or drones or something like that. I always say, then make your donations to get teachers stipends that are coaching robotics. I know I talked about that earlier, but when we look at the data, and I'm an engineer, right? So I'm a data-driven person. We have some very stable programs in parts of this country. And if you go up to New England, we have coaches that have been doing this for 8, 10, 12 years, and they have very little turnover. And then we have other parts of the country where it feels like we're helping train a new robotics coach every other year. And the big difference is those teachers are provided stipends, and it's not making them rich, but what it is doing is it's covering their gas and all the incidentals they buy and the fast food, and at least giving them a little bit of relief, so when they're telling their spouse that, hey, I'm going to be absent for the next 3 months, at least they know that it's not coming out of their pocket as well. So there's been many times that I've gone to advocacy groups and I said, don't worry about giving the REC Foundation money, use that funding to get some teachers some stipends. So the data shows it makes a big difference.
There you go. And I'm with you on that. I remember doing my robotics program at my elementary. And I remember one year, my principal said, like, hey, like it's tough for us, stipend wise and everything. I said, look, I said, it's okay. Don't worry about it. I'm still going to do it. But all I said is like, is there a way that we can get me into a conference? And then I just went to a conference just because I wanted some PD that was a little closer, and they helped out and they made it happen. So sometimes, it just all depends, but I'm with you, whatever you can do to help teachers offset off that, that time, that effort and so on can definitely help out. All right, Dan, we'll start off with you this time for this next one. All right. If you could have a billboard with anything on it, what would it be and why?
Unlike Omar, I did not prep for these questions. If I could have a billboard with anything on it, this is going to sound so cliche, but I would actually say acceptance. Because the one thing I really like about the REC Foundation, and one of the messages I'm really trying to bring, is that robotics has its own language. And I've been fortunate. I've gone to robotics competitions across the world, most of the states. And no matter where you are, when you have teams from the Deep South against teams from the Pacific Northwest, or you have teams from China competing with teams from Germany, all the students cooperate and they all speak this language of robotics. And I think robotics, it kind of leads to this understanding and this acceptance that we need more of. So, we talk about STEM and that's what's important. And we talk about the soft skills, which we could talk an hour just on the soft skills that our students get. But one of the things that underappreciated things is this acceptance and understanding that robotics kids have when they compete with and against each other.
Excellent. Great answer. All right, Patricia, how about yourself? If you could have a billboard with anything on it, what would it be and why?
So the backdrop would be my girls doing the Rosie the Riveter pose, and then a big message that says Latinas leading in STEM. Emphasis on the word leading, just to show that they're not just participators in STEM, but they are leaders in STEM, challenging those stereotypes that are out there.
Love it. Great answer, Patricia. Love it. All right, Omar, how about you? What would your billboard have on it?
How do I follow that up, man? Honestly, I think as far as like a billboard or anything, I'd love to see be driving down the Interstate 10 one day and seeing one of my students up there, knowing that they did something. Maybe they went to space or discovered something or had some kind of, I'd love to see one of my students up there knowing that, maybe it started because of robotics, or just knowing that they continue to pursue a career, because of this. I really think that'd be filling for me.
There you go. That's wonderful. That's definitely great. Always cherishing that student success. Like one thing that I learned as a teacher is that we may not often see the fruit of our labor right away as students go through us, but maybe later on at the end, as they get older and you see them, then you start seeing that fruit. And it would just be amazing, obviously, to have one of your former students up there, saying like, hey, this is what I'm doing, some kind of STEM related field, and sharing some sort of success. That's great. All right. And the last question. All right. So this time we'll start with Omar. Omar, if you had to write a book tomorrow, what would it be about?
I've been working on this for a year, since last December. I've actually wrote a kid's book. And I haven't told anybody. My parents don't even know. This has just been private, but I thought this would be a good time to share. I wrote a kid's book about our year during the pandemic. I was at a new school with new kids. I have kids that are behind masks. I have kids that haven't spoken with each other, socialized since March. We came into a school late in October, in person for the first time, and it's all about finding your voice. And it really goes around a particular student and his growth with me. And Dan, you're in there. We have your email talking about live remote tournaments in there. The excitement of getting that. And there's tidbits for coaches, things that my kids put in their engineering notebook, how we prepare. There's illustrations. Like I said, I'm waiting on like 3 more illustrations, and then I'll start. Anyways, but yeah,
Wow.
I did it. The book is written, and I'm excited to share it. I can't. Yeah.
Omar, well, I'm excited, and I just want to say thank you so much for sharing that news here today. You know, nobody knew, and you picked this platform to share that, and I want to say thank you for that and sharing that special moment with My Ed Tech Life and with all our audience members, and obviously with Dan and Patricia that are here, everybody that's joining us. So congratulations on the book. Right now, I want to invite you back once your book gets published. Please come back, reach out to me and say, hey, Fonz, the book is out. And we'll definitely dedicate a show to that work that you put into that book. So thank you so much, Omar, for sharing that. Patricia, that's a hard one to follow now.
And
Okay.
now I'm the one with how do I follow
But
that?
now, am I going to hear 2 book announcements today, baby? So, Patricia, if you had to write a book tomorrow, what would it be about?
So after seeing him and all the dedication he's put into this passion project of his and seeing it come to life, it has given me ideas of, okay, what do you want to write your book about? We got to do this. It would definitely be about the journey of the Ladybots, but like kind of like a children's book version to push it out into our elementary schools to try to get more girls to join STEM, maybe convince some teachers to be the face of STEM, some female teachers, so that they can push that at their campus. But definitely cannot follow
Yes.
the true book
No.
that's coming out.
Love it though, Patricia. That's such a great concept. You know, like you said, early elementary, getting them excited. I mean, there's so many great platforms for early elementary kids that they could be using and practicing and so on. But I love that, and then again, that just feeds into the program and just allows, young women to say, like, hey, there's STEM that is available, there's robotics, there's programming and all of that. So that's great. All right. And Dan, we will go ahead and wrap up with you, Dan. If you could or if you had to write a book tomorrow, what would it be about?
Mine would probably be about taking risks, overcoming failures, and persevering. And if you've ever been to Vex Worlds, that tends to be what I talk about. And I'm a big believer. I tell my staff all the time, I make more mistakes than they do combined, right? But I also think I've taken a lot of risks, and some of them paid off. I think our drones program, girl powered, our code of conduct, student centered, there were all things that we had a lot of naysayers about, and I think they've all been successful. But one of my chapters would be on how we handled the pandemic, because the REC Foundation and Vex Robotics realized we did not want robotics to stop. We didn't just want to have something virtual. So we came up with the live remote tournament. We invested over $1 million so that students could still build physical robots and then use the internet and cameras to connect to other teams to still have competitions. And I don't think we've properly told that story. There's a reason that we've come out of the pandemic bigger than we were going in, right? And I think it's because we took that huge chance of coming up with something new. We had lots and lots of problems in the November, December of that year. We didn't even know if we could make it work, but we kept persevering, and it culminated with our live remote national champion or world championship, where 36 countries competed against each other in robotics while everybody was quarantined. So I'm glad, I'm so excited to read Omar's book, because it sounds like that's a teeny piece of that. But that is a story I really want to tell. But it's all, again, take risks, overcome your failures, and persevere.
Excellent. I love that. And I have something very similar for my educator practice, transitioning from business and sales to education and just being in education now for 17 years. It was always improvise, adapt, and overcome. So very similar to what you're stating. But I thank you so much for this evening. Like my bucket is full, guys. I am very full of joy because of the work that you all are doing in just being out there and putting yourselves out there too as well in the STEM world and robotics and making it accessible for all students, but especially for our female students to show them what they are capable of, what is available to them. And also, like you mentioned, Patricia, just your heart that you have for that representation. Omar also as well, just that heart that I hear that you have for your students and helping them succeed and building those soft skills. And obviously, Dan, the work that you have done in many years because of that one experience and then just putting your foot forward and starting to coach and then that transition from automotive and all engineering and then coming into this world and the work that you're doing here, it is amazing. So thank you for what you're doing. I really appreciate all of that. And again, for all our audience members that are watching, thank you, Sherry, thank you, Erica, thank you, Tanya. For those of you that will be catching this on the replay or rewatching it, thank you, as always, for making my EdTech life what it is today. And as you see today, these types of conversations, this is why we do what we do for you, to bring you amazing guests, amazing conversations with passionate educators, practitioners, companies, everybody that is here, guys, that you can definitely take some knowledge nuggets from and sprinkle them onto what you are already doing great. So thank you, guys. If you haven't yet, please make sure that you follow us on all socials at My EdTech Life. And also, please make sure you subscribe to our podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcast. We're pretty much everywhere, but whichever one your favorite podcast player is, please make sure you check us out there. But don't forget to visit our website also at myedtech.life, where you can also check out this amazing episode and the other 236 wonderful episodes with just amazing conversations. Our goal and our mission is to bring educators, creators, practitioners, entrepreneurs, edupreneurs together one show at a time. So thank you all for your support. And my friends, until next time, don't forget, stay techie.